Once upon a time, in a world obsessed with seriousness, there lived a jester named Boreus. Boreus was a master of mirth, a sultan of slapstick, a king of comedic chaos. His fame spread like wildfire. From dusty circus tents to grand theaters, people flocked to witness the Boreus phenomenon. Newspapers couldn't get enough of him. Little did Boreus know, his act was about to get a serious upgrade. America, land of the free, home of the brave, and apparently a nation with a surprisingly well-developed sense of humor. Boreus, with his signature blend of wit and whimsy, was invited to a presidential debate. The politicians, with their carefully rehearsed speeches and even more carefully sculpted hair, never stood a chance. Boreus skewered their platitudes with a single raised eyebrow. The people loved it. Boreus, the jester who refused to take himself seriously, became the unlikely voice of a nation yearning for a reason to smile. His victory speech, delivered while balancing a stack of pancakes on his head, was short, sweet, and left everyone wondering what on earth was going to happen next. The White House, that bastion of history and tradition, had never seen anything quite like Boreus. He arrived not in a limousine but on a unicycle, a trail of confetti marking his path. His first order of business, redecorate. Down came the somber portraits of past presidents, replaced by whimsical cartoons Boreus had drawn himself. The press had a field day, reporting on the circus at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, with a mix of amusement and disbelief. Boreus's infectious laughter, his genuine joy in the face of the mundane, was changing the atmosphere in Washington. Governing by laughter wasn't always easy, but Boreus was determined to prove that a little levity could go a long way. His first act as president, declaring National Slinky Day, a holiday celebrated with joyous abandon and a surprising amount of tangled metal. His policies, often announced via limerick or interpretive dance, were surprisingly effective. He tackled healthcare reform with a nationwide game of operation, using giant inflatable organs to explain complex medical procedures. He convinced Congress to invest in a nationwide network of laughter yoga studios, arguing that a happy workforce was a productive workforce. Surprisingly, it worked. International relations got a comedic makeover under Boreus's leadership. He replaced stuffy state dinners with potluck picnics on the White House lawn, complete with three-legged races and water balloon tosses. Peace treaties were negotiated over games of charades and thumb wars. World leaders, initially skeptical, found themselves charmed by Boreus's unorthodox approach. For perhaps the first time in history, the world was united not by fear or power, but by laughter. Boreus won, claiming victory was a piece of cake. As Boreus's presidency continued, the world watched in amazement. He had turned the White House into a house of mirth, Washington, D.C. into a circus of joy, and international diplomacy into a giant comedy routine. He had proven that laughter was not a distraction from the serious business of governing, but an essential part of it. His legacy extended far beyond the realm of politics. He had shown that it was possible to lead with a smile, to govern with a giggle, and to change the world with a well-timed pratfall. Leaving the White House was bittersweet, even if it involved a farewell parade featuring a marching band playing yakety sax and a rogue confetti cannon that showered the Washington Monument in rainbow sprinkles. Boreus, however, never looked back. He'd traded Air Force One for a slightly dented Aeroflot jet, his collection of oversized novelty ties now accented with a Ushanka hat, gifted by a bemused Putin during their last pie-throwing competition. Russia, he quickly discovered, was a nation that took its vodka straight, and its humor even straighter. Food, too, was a cultural adventure. Svetlana, his ever-patient translator, became his guide through the labyrinthine world of Russian customs and protocols. The Kremlin, that imposing symbol of Russian power, had never seen anything quite like Boreus. His arrival, complete with a marching band, a juggling bear, courtesy of a traveling circus he'd befriended, and a shower of confetti sent shockwaves through the normally stoic guards. His first act as Russia's newest resident was to replace the stern-faced portraits of past leaders with whimsical caricatures he'd drawn himself. His attempts to lighten the mood, however, were often met with blank stares and the occasional furrowed brow. Undeterred, Boreas pressed on, convinced that beneath the surface of seriousness a sense of humor lurked. He organized a Kremlin-wide game of hide-and-seek, convinced that laughter was the key to breaking down barriers. Governing Russia, Boreas quickly discovered, was not all vodka shots and impromptu dance-offs. The country faced real problems: corruption, poverty, a shrinking economy. His advisors, a group of seasoned politicians used to dealing with these issues in the most serious of manners, watched with a mix of amusement and apprehension as their new leader tackled these challenges with his trademark blend of humor and unorthodox thinking. His policies, when they emerged, were often as surprising as they were effective. To combat corruption, he instituted a random act of silliness program, requiring government officials to perform a random act of absurdity each day. As Boreas settled into his new role, he discovered that laughter, like music, was a universal language, one that transcended cultural differences. He began incorporating elements of Russian culture into his act, learning to juggle traditional wooden dolls, mastering the art of the balalaika, and even attempting to sing along to Russian folk songs. His pronunciation left something to be desired, but his enthusiasm was infectious. He discovered that beneath the surface of their seriousness, the Russian people had a deep-seated love of laughter, a yearning for joy and absurdity, and as the laughter spread, it began to chip away at the walls of suspicion and distrust that had long divided Russia from the rest of the world. One of the more unexpected challenges of leading Russia, Boreas discovered, was the sheer quantity of beards. Thus, the Great Bearded Bake-Off was born. The rules were simple. Each region of Russia had to submit its most impressive beard, along with a baked good that best represented its unique character. The competition was fierce. Beards, sculpted into elaborate shapes resembling everything from the Kremlin's onion domes to the iconic statue of Mother Russia, paraded across the stage. The Great Bearded Bake-Off, much to the surprise of Boreas's advisors, was a resounding success. One of Boreas's core beliefs was the power of community. He believed that laughter, like a good bowl of borscht, was best shared. So he launched a campaign to encourage neighborly love, one rubber chicken and shared recipe at a time.
His first order of business: declare National Doorbell Ditch Day, a holiday celebrated by leaving anonymous gifts on neighbors' doorsteps.
Soon, doorsteps across Russia were adorned with everything from homemade piroshki to hand-knitted items. He organized community potlucks in Red Square, replacing military parades with culinary delights. By encouraging people to laugh and break bread together, he fostered a sense of unity. Boreas, despite his aversion to all things serious, was not oblivious to the darker aspects of Russia's history. He'd heard stories of the gulags, the forced labor camps that had cast a long shadow over the country's past.
So he launched initiatives to transform these places of pain into symbols of hope. He worked with historians to convert former gulag sites into museums and memorials.
He also had a more unorthodox idea: transform some of these abandoned sites into giggle camps. He envisioned places filled with laughter, joy, and the simple pleasures of childhood.
The idea, initially met with skepticism, gained traction. Donations poured in from around the world, supporting Boreas's vision. Volunteers flocked to help build and staff the camps.
The first giggle camp opened its doors, welcoming children from all over Russia. Laughter echoed through the trees, replacing the silence that had haunted these places for far too long.
One dreary Monday morning, the unthinkable happened. Boreas woke up with a case of the giggles that wouldn't stop. He chuckled uncontrollably during a meeting with his advisors.
The Russian people were initially amused, but as the day wore on, concern turned to panic.
News outlets reported on the crisis with alarm and glee.
The stock market plummeted. It was chaos.
Doctors worked tirelessly to diagnose Boreas's affliction. The answer was unexpected. Boreas was allergic to seriousness.
The cure, a healthy dose of absurdity. Boreas took a deep breath and let out a giant sneeze. The force of the sneeze sent a shockwave through the Kremlin. And then, the giggling stopped. The room erupted in cheers. The crisis had been averted. Not everyone appreciated Boreas's brand of joyous anarchy. The oligarchs, those titans of industry, were not amused.
He's turned the Kremlin into a vaudeville stage, seethed Vladimir, a man who built his empire on nickel mines.
We must act, hissed Natalia, a woman who controlled Russia's media. Their plan was as convoluted as it was desperate, and a very confused bear intended to loose upon Boreas during a diplomatic luncheon. What they hadn't accounted for was Boreas's uncanny ability to turn disaster into slapstick gold. The smear campaign backfired spectacularly when the fabricated photos of Boreas riding shirtless on a bear went viral. The diplomatic luncheon was briefly interrupted by a heartwarming scene of man and beast sharing tea and a plate of blini.
Governing by joy had its challenges, particularly when faced with the labyrinthine world of Russian bureaucracy. Boreas, used to signing bills into law with novelty oversized pens, found himself adrift in a sea of paperwork.
It appears Svetlana announced one morning that a Fabergé egg has gone missing.
Boreas, mid-juggle with a set of nesting dolls, barely blinked. We'll find it then. We can't have important historical artifacts just wandering off. Imagine the paperwork.
Thus began a hilarious and increasingly surreal investigation into the heart of Russian bureaucracy. The missing egg eventually turned up, misfiled in the wrong cabinet, mistakenly labeled as a decorative egg-shaped paperweight.
Boreas saw an opportunity for reform. From now on, all government paperwork will be color-coded according to its level of importance.
From Cold War to Comedy Central, Boreas takes on the world one joke at a time. Boreas's comedic diplomacy transformed international relations into a hilarious spectacle. He preferred go-kart diplomacy, charades, and knock-knock jokes with world leaders. Laughter, he declared at the UN, is the shortest distance between nations. He convinced the UN to make April Fool's Day an official holiday for international understanding through laughter. For the first time, people saw beyond stereotypes, united by humor. The accidental ambassador of Joy Boreas, the UN, and a very public pie fight. The United Nations building had never quite experienced a force like Boreas. His arrival, heralded by a small marching band playing a polka rendition of Ode to Joy and a flock of pigeons dyed the colors of the Russian flag, was met with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity.
Remember, Mr. President, Svetlana reminded him, decorum, diplomacy, no sudden movements.
Boreas, adjusting a bow tie that lit up, grinned. Svetlana, my dear, where's the fun in predictable?
He'd come armed with a translator, Svetlana, perpetually exasperated a suitcase full of rubber chickens disguised as diplomatic gifts, and a heart full of hope. Boreas's speech, delivered partly in broken Russian with exaggerated gestures, and partly through interpretive dance involving a confused intern dressed as a dove, was memorable. He proposed a global initiative, International Giggle Fest, a day dedicated to celebrating joy. To the astonishment of seasoned diplomats, the idea gained traction. A diplomatic luncheon devolved into a pie fight when Boreas accidentally launched a meringue missile at the French ambassador. The ensuing chaos made international headlines. The bear on the global stage ballet, Blini, and Breaking Down Borders. Boreas shared Russia's treasures through dance, cuisine, and humor. A world tour featuring the Bolshoi Ballet reimagined. Traditional tutus were replaced with contemporary designs. The result, breakdancing bears, contortionist ballerinas, and a glitter finale. Critics were divided, but the public loved it. The Bolshoi Ballet, Boreas style, became a global sensation. Next came a culinary offensive, a global food truck tour serving Russian fare with slapstick. From New York to Rome, Blini and borscht filled the air. Boreas made Russia approachable and lovable through art and humor. When laughter became policy, Boreas's legacy, from the Kremlin to the cosmos. Boreas's unconventional approach reshaped international relations. Laughter became an invaluable tool to connect and disarm. He created a Department of Joy within the United Nations and established laughter embassies worldwide. Even NASA incorporated humor into astronaut training. The world learned to laugh with Boreas. Barriers crumbled under shared joy. His legacy showed laughter as a necessity. As Boreas prepared to leave, he knew he'd made the world brighter, more joyful, and ready to face the future with a smile. The legacy of laughter, how Boreus redefined leadership, one guffaw at a time. Boreus the Bold, the clown who conquered not one, but two world superpowers, with rubber chickens and good humor no less, left behind a legacy as colorful as his wardrobe and twice as loud. Pundits, still picking confetti out of their hair, struggled to define his impact. Was it political revolution by comedic stealth, accidental genius, or a stark reminder that sometimes the most effective leaders are the ones who can make you snort borscht out your nose? His impact on global politics was undeniable. The UN, once a stage for carefully worded barbs and thinly veiled threats, now had a dedicated seltzer zone for impromptu water gun fights during diplomatic standoffs. Peace treaties were now signed using oversized novelty pens that played Pop Goes the Weasel, a Boreus innovation that oddly seemed to improve their effectiveness tenfold. But it went beyond policy. Boreus had tapped into a universal truth. Laughter is the great equalizer. It transcends language barriers, political ideologies, and even the most stubborn frown lines etched by years of taking oneself too seriously. His presidency, in both its American and Russian iterations, served as a giant, brightly colored reset button for the world. He'd reminded everyone that it was okay to find joy in unexpected places, to embrace absurdity as a coping mechanism, and to never underestimate the power of a well-timed whoopee cushion during a tense negotiation. Did the laughter last, or did we order in a side of cynicism? Boreus didn't stick around for a victory lap. He vanished, leaving rumors and unanswered questions. The world had been irrevocably changed. Did politicians revert to seriousness? Some did. Citizens used to humor were less inclined to tolerate the bland. The world had developed a taste for laughter. The jester's final bow, a reminder that sometimes we all need a good pie in the face. The tale of Boreus the Bold is ultimately a story about hope. It's a reminder that even in a world obsessed with seriousness, where headlines scream of disaster and politicians seem determined to suck the joy out of everything, laughter still has the power to break through. It's a testament to the power of absurdity, to the importance of not taking ourselves too seriously, and to the simple truth that a well-timed pratfall can sometimes be the most effective form of diplomacy. Boreus's legacy is a challenge to the status quo, an invitation to reimagine leadership, and a reminder that sometimes the best way to lead is to let go of control, embrace the chaos, and never, ever underestimate the power of a well-placed whoopee cushion. So the next time you find yourself bogged down by the weight of the world, remember Boreus. Remember the clown who dared to dream of a world united by laughter. And then go out and throw a pie, or tell a joke, or simply embrace the absurdity of it all. You might be surprised at what happens.